So we've been going through the Discourse on Method by Descartes using the Hackett edition, and it's almost time for the second paragraph of part 6, which is a crucial paragraph. I could almost use the word climactic, but maybe triumphant would be a better adjective. The triumphant second paragraph of part 6 is where we're trying to get, and it's going to, well, in a nutshell, it's going to replace the provisional code of ethics based on acceptance from part 3 of the Discourse with a new code of ethics based on control and change. Instead of accepting the things in the world that kind of suck, now we're going to fix them using science and technology. That's the plan. That's the agenda. That's the new program, the new way of living are outlined in part 6 of the Discourse on Method. And I say it's almost time for that. I don't think it's quite time for that yet, because before talking about that, I'm going to address a puzzle in interpreting the Discourse on Method that's puzzled me somewhat over the last, I don't know how many years, 5, 10, something like 5 or 10, maybe 15, I don't know. Don't ask me to do math right now. So, the puzzle is, why does Descartes sometimes talk as if, or at least why does this text sometimes talk as if the provisional code of morals in part 3 is itself derived from Descartes' method? Because it seems to me that the structure of the text is pretty simple. Part 1, he describes how he had a great education and still didn't find knowledge. Part 2, he sits in a stove-heated room and thinks about how we can get knowledge, and he comes up with an awesome new method for getting knowledge. Part 3, he gives us a provisional code of morals for how to live until we've gotten that knowledge. Part 4, he gets that knowledge, establishing the new foundations of knowledge. I think, therefore I am, and I am a mind, and mind thinks and does not occupy space. And also, because of certain ideas in my mind and a clever argument, God exists. And because God is a perfect being, therefore, etc., another clever argument, the world outside my mind exists, and my 5 senses put me in contact with it, and reason can be trusted if I use it carefully. And also, that world outside my mind that's made of matter is space with matter in it, and the matter obeys the laws of physics and occupies space, and that's all it is, and that's all it does. And so that's how we get the dualism of part 5, Descartes' new theory of metaphysics. The universe is divided into minds and matter. Mind thinks and doesn't occupy space. Matter occupies space and obeys the laws of physics and does not think, and that's all there is to it. And then that gives us the foundations for a new science. And then science in Discourse on Method Part 6 is Descartes' new agenda or social program or plan for fixing the world. But it's the urgent moral, and it is urgent, and it is a moral agenda. It's about achieving the good life. It's the new urgent moral agenda of Part 6 that comes from the method of doubt, because it's based on the metaphysics of Part 5, which is based on the new foundations for knowledge of Part 4, which is to say it's the moral teachings of Part 6 of the Discourse on Method that are the ones that are derived from Descartes' method of getting knowledge. And so that leaves me with this puzzle, and I'll give you the puzzle, and I'll give you a provisional tentative answer, and then in the next video we'll finally get to the exciting second paragraph of Part 6. Let me go now to the beginning of the text. In this edition, page 1, and in italics, we find a description of the book describing Descartes in the third person. If this discourse seems too long to be read at one time, it may be divided into 6 parts. In the first part, you'll find various considerations concerning the sciences. Note, again, if I haven't said this often enough or at all, I probably said it. I hope I said it. Note, possibly again, possibly for the first time, science means branch of knowledge, more or less, in this usage. It doesn't mean what we now think of as science. What we now think of as science is a particular branch of what used to be called the sciences. In the first part, you'll find various considerations concerning the sciences, or the areas of knowledge. In the second part, the chief rules of the method which the author sought. In the third part, some of the rules of morality which he has derived from this method. So that's puzzled me for years. Why the heck would this introductory paragraph, which reads, talking about Descartes in the third person, like it was written by a publisher maybe, but I seriously doubt it was written with no input from Descartes. Honestly, you can check for check with a real Descartes scholar, maybe, if you want to find out the backstory on this paragraph. At any rate, it's in the book. It shouldn't be in the book and say something false about the book. So let me get back to not interrupting myself and stating the puzzle. Why the heck does this paragraph introducing the book identify very specifically the provisional code of morality from Part 3 as the fruits of Descartes' method, as rules for morality derived from the method, when it was all provisional and no rules for morality that stick should be in Part 3 or 2 or 1 or 4 or even 5. They can only be in Part 6 after Descartes established a new metaphysics in Part 5 based on the new foundations for knowledge in Part 4. That's the only way you can get morality derived from the method, right? I don't understand this. At least for years I didn't. I'm not going to give you a provisional answer, and then we'll go to the triumphant second paragraph of the Discourse on Method, Part 6, in the next video. Provisional answer coming up shortly. First, let's go back to Part 3. Descartes has been sitting in the stove-heated room for a while, and he's describing the rules for gaining knowledge he found there, and then he says, and finally, just as it is not enough before beginning to rebuild the house where one is living simply to pull it down, and to make provision for materials and architectures, or to train oneself in architecture, and also to have carefully drawn up the building plans for it, but it is also necessary to be provided with someplace else where one can live comfortably while working on it. So too, in order not to remain irresolute in my actions, while reason required me to be so in my judgments, and in order not to cease to live as happily as possible during this time I formulated a provisional code of morals. So Part 3 is clearly a provisional code of morals. But why then does that introductory paragraph on page 1 identify it as something derived from the method? And I'll give you now my answer. Note that this first paragraph of Part 3 specifically says that the whole provisional code of morals is part of his reflections while sitting in the stove-heated room. The sitting in the stove-heated room and thinking that started at the beginning of Part 2. So that's important, but there's a little bit more than that. Note that he's been describing for all of Part 2 the method itself, the method of gaining knowledge and getting rid of false ideas. And then he says, and finally, I need to get this provisional code of morals, a way to act as well as possible even when I don't have knowledge, a way to live even when I have not yet established knowledge on a solid foundation. So he's presenting this as if it is itself part of the method, and I think it is. It's provisional, but it's still part of the method. It's not a code of morality that's derived from the method of doubt and therefore certain. For that, you can only look to Part 6 of the Discourse. Part 3 of the Discourse is a provisional code of morality, but it's nonetheless derived from the method of doubt because it's specifically part of the method to come up with a provisional code of morals to live by until you can establish knowledge on a solid foundation. That's it. Let me pause and see if I can paraphrase that. Descartes' method, as outlined in Part 2, does not stop at Part 2, but it also extends to the provisional code of morals in Part 3. And that provisional code of morals is provisional. It is temporary, but it's still part of the method. The method says, here is a way to get rid of all our errors, and here is a way to gain as much knowledge as possible, and here as a third component of the method, number 1, get rid of errors, number 2, build as much knowledge as possible, but number 3, here is a way to live until we finish the work of building as much knowledge as possible. That is itself also part of the method. The provisional code of morals was part of the method and still provisional. That is my provisional answer to that puzzle that's puzzled me for years. And now with that explained, I'm ready to shut up for the duration of this video and see you here next week while talking about the triumphant second paragraph of the Discourse on Method, Part 6.